Today we're going to be talking about the 12 rules of strength. And what these 12 rules are going to show us and what we're going to go through is a list of principles that we need to be thinking about when we're strength training. It also will be this kind of what strength is and what it isn't, because there's lots of myths out there in strength training. They can kind of keep people from doing it when really that's what they need. Keep it simple is a very strong principle, and it doesn't mean that it's easy strength training, it's that it's simple to do in your week or in your training session, and it doesn't have to be complex. There are very, very highly effective but complex ways of getting stronger, but we are not weightlifters. We're not trying to break past big, PRs. We're just trying to get strong enough. And so keeping it simple means it could be a 20 or 30 minute strength session where it's 2 or 3 sets. Maybe it's 5 reps of a deadlift, a press, a pull, a squat, and then you can get the heck out of the session and go to your next thing. People often confuse simple with easy, and simple just doesn't mean complex. You'll have a focus when you're in your strength training phase. And so what we mean by this is you might be focusing on one lift. Maybe it's weighted pull-ups, maybe it's a front squat, maybe it's a press. So after you warm up, that will be your lead exercise, and maybe you'll be working in these, what we would call developmental loads. So you're trying to push that up, but all the other lifts get done as well, but maybe not at a high load that maybe you would use if it was the focus. And so the best analogy we have here, in your strength session, you might have kind of a hot burner up front, which is one movement pattern or one exercise. And then you've got the other major movement patterns kind of simmering off in the background. Stick with a training session or a workout for at least 10 or more sessions. Probably not much more than 15. But what we mean by this is folks have an awesome plan and they just do it once or twice. They don't see any improvement, and then they just go to the next best thing they saw on Instagram or online. But we don't see the body's ability to adapt until at least somewhere in that 8 to 10 sessions. We say 10 because it's perfect when you think about 2 days a week for 5 weeks. That usually fits in people's schedule. Learn the movement correctly first. I am all about getting under heavy strength exercises, but if you don't know how to do the movement correctly first, we're putting strength on top of dysfunction. And so we've got to use practice loads, we've got to take video of ourselves, maybe we're reading a book, maybe we've hired a coach, but learn those movements first, and then you can start to add load. If you can't perform the movement or exercise, we've got to figure out why. And it might go way beyond whether you're reading the right textbook or looking at the right video. It could actually be a mobility issue, whether that's through a former injury or maybe even some genetic reason. But you've got to figure out why. You can't just kind of pretend like you know it and move forward. Strength isn't done, or strength training isn't done instead of climbing. It's done additional to your climbing. And this can be a really hard thing for folks to not necessarily understand, but ask really good questions like, why am I doing strength training? If you're saying it's just kind of addition to. The real reason is it's making our body a little bit more resilient. We can be a little bit less prone to injury, and we can just be a stronger athlete to then be ready for harder climbing training or harder climbs or harder, progressions through our climbing. It's the foundation of any athletic performance. Our athletic performance is climbing, and so what we don't want this to be is people choosing to do a strength session instead of a climbing session. It's done in conjunction with, because it's a supporting factor and it's foundational. You will not get huge. I absolutely love this one. It's such a common myth that people think, oh, strength training, bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm gonna have, a huge chest or really big thighs, and that's gonna hurt my climbing. The type of training that we're talking about here is very low volume, but high intensity. So, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, 5 sets of 2. And if you think about this in other sports, like a cyclist, what what's the big part of their body because of cycling? It's their quads, right? It's super low intensity, lots of pedaling over lots and lots of volume. And so hypertrophy is the technical term of like muscle mass. Happens when it's low intensity and really high volume. That's not strength training, that's bodybuilding. Or, you might need it for your sport. We think about it with climbers. It's the reason why our forearms are big. Lots of low intensity things, but at a high volume. So strength training is not gonna get you huge, I promise. Little and often over the long haul. Our best analogy here is the same way you wanna save money. We're not trying to just get into the gym and make it super hard, real brief, a few times a year, and that's strength training. It's usually lots of kind of medium to intense sessions every so often, but over your entire career. What usually happens is two things, is people think, oh, I need to make this thing really intense and I'm gonna kind of juice up my strength for my season, and they get injured, or they just don't get any adaptation from it at all, and they just think it doesn't work. So very little over a long, sustainable career is where this strength training needs to be placed. Don't chase the pump. Climbers love chasing the pump, or we understand what that pump kind of moment or feeling feels like. And so, yeah, sometimes that's featured in our training when we're doing maybe some intervals or some more specific power endurance training, or maybe we're trying to gain some capacity, so we're doing these like longer sustained efforts. But in strength training, as soon as you feel pumped, you've left the realm of strength and switched to different energy systems, and you're not actually working on your strength anymore. So in your specific stated strength session and you feel pumped, you've missed the mark. It's okay, you can just make a note and be like, oop, I went a little too far, I went too many reps, or I didn't rest long enough. Next session, let's change that. Anytime you feel pumped, you've left the realm of strength. Tension is king. And I love explaining this in strength training to climbers because they understand what tension is, or what that ability to squeeze and fire all your muscles at once to perform a move. It's the same thing in strength training. And if anyone's strength trained for long enough, they'll understand that pressure in their belly and those power breaths and their ability to squeeze even the smallest little muscle around a joint or even in a limb that they're not working actually produces the best strength results. And yes, we can have some physical adaptation to our strength, but really what we're after for the most part is this central nervous system and our ability to fire all our muscles at once exactly when we need them, and be rigid when we're in our most compromised hard position, and then be able to relax them when we're done. Strong antagonists make strong agonists. And what we're talking about here, and it's obviously very classic with a climber, is that their pull muscles are very strong and their push or press muscles are very weak. And there's this thing that happens where our body can govern our ability to get stronger in pulling because our push is so weak. And it's our body's way trying to get us to not have a shoulder injury, but a lot of us don't listen to that and we push through. And our pressing is really weak and our pulling's too strong. So if we can work on the antagonist muscles, like pressing and squatting and hinging, what we're not usually using in our sport, or at least at a high level, we can make those joints more robust, be less injury prone, and we can also start to up those levels of the movement patterns that we actually are already working and are already quite strong at. Have a reason for every exercise that you do, and I think this last principle is much like the first. We've got to keep it simple. It's really easy to add in some new exercise, or, oh yeah, that one really, felt hard, so I'm going to add that in. But most times, or more often than not, you're just doing more of the same movement pattern that you already did in your very simple, good strength session, and you're just adding it in because you think you need more. We've got to get away from this more is better mindset. Less is definitely better in these sessions. And you've got to look at your strength session and be like, why am I doing that exercise? Why am I doing that exercise? And you might have a good reason, but you also want to see if it's being done already in your session and you just cut out the thing that you've just added. So make sure you have a reason for why you do each exercise. As climbers, I really think these 12 rules are very important to help guide someone who's just engaging in strength training for the first time, but also keeps us veteran climbers grounded when we're thinking about our training through our seasons, or if we kind of feel like we've lost our way. This stuff is really important, not only for your climbing, but just for your general strength and fitness, even well beyond your career as a climber.